Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. We are so excited about our program. We actually began planning it last year when we were in Kentucky. We had broken out of our sessions and North Carolina was meeting in a room, and we were thinking about what we could do, what our entertainment could be. And we thought, what a perfect thing to bring Mill Voices to you, because it's something all of us in all of our states share. So we're very excited about our program. And how nice to wake up this morning to being the front page news. So if you pick up a newspaper, Jerry's the writer of the story. His phone number and emails at the end. I'm sure he'd appreciate an email or a phone call thanking him for that. And a very special thank you to the North Carolina Humanities Council. We are so appreciative of their funding, which has made this evening possible. We are honored to have such a talented and diverse group of people to share their poetry, stories, and songs about Southern textile mill life, giving voice to the people who once worked in the textile mills that for nearly a century was a leading industry in the South. Our performance tonight runs about an hour and 45 minutes. We don't have any kind of formal intermission planned, but you probably saw the restrooms right out the door to your right. We've got some leftover water and lemonade from an earlier evening there, so help yourself over there. At the end of our performance tonight, we'll have a brief question and answer session with our performers. And then after that, as you probably already have seen, we have books and CDs for sale. If you haven't had the opportunity to see the wonderful display that Kathy Berry and Jerry Knoll have brought from the Textile Heritage Museum, you'll have plenty of time after the program to visit with them and learn more about the museum. And so, our first performer tonight is author Darnell Arnault, who will be reading from her book of poetry, What Travels With Us. Darnell grew up in the mill town of Fieldale in the Virginia foothills. What Travels With Us was the 2005 winner of the Weatherford Award for Fiction and Poetry from the Appalachian Studies Association and the 2006 Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance Book Award for Poetry. Two of Darnell's poems were featured on American Public Radio's Writer's Almanac with Garrison Keillor, Home and Some in Pieces. Please welcome Darnell Arnault.
Thank you, Julie. And I want to thank everybody for having me at this conference. I'm really delighted. As you'll hear, if you come to the luncheon tomorrow, you'll find out that I actually started out at a community college in Jacksonville, North Carolina. I was a Marine Corps bride after I left the mill town. So lots of stories in my background. What Travels With Us started as a series of personality poems, and I didn't realize they were all connected initially. Can everybody hear me? Okay. I didn't realize they were connected initially. I was just writing poems. The characters, I wanted to write short fiction, and I didn't have time to write short fiction because I was a single mother and I had way too much to do. And I eventually ran a cleaning service. And I had to have foot surgery. And I was in bed for 2 weeks. And all these characters that I had milling around in my head as I was cleaning houses started to speak to me. And they would just tell me these little short things. But they were the kinds of things that revealed a life, I began to realize. So I started writing them down, and then every morning I would go to McDonald's after I dropped my children off at school. They were in elementary and middle school. And I would spend about 20 minutes working on my poetry before I went to clean a house. I ran this cleaning service called Jill of All Trades, original title. And but it's okay. It supported me and my kids for a while. And but I would do that before I went to clean house. And these characters took on such a strong life. And then one day I realized that they all were connected by place. I grew up in a little town of Fieldale, which is not very far from here. And Fieldale was built by Marshall Field. A lot of people don't realize that he came in and bought up all these cow pastures and built the whole town. It was a planned community on a grid system. He put up a Baptist church, he put up a Methodist church, a Christian church, and that was about as multicultural as Philadelphia was. But he, was trying to cover all his bases for the time. And then he went up into the mountains of Virginia and North Carolina and recruited people to come in and work in this factory, Fieldcrest. It's sad to say that not long after this book was published, Fieldcrest Towel Mill in Philadelphia, Virginia was closed. And it was still making a profit when it closed, but the company that bought it was no longer making a profit. And so now those towels are made in China. And that's a whole nother presentation. But, and so the town of Henry County, the community of Henry County, Virginia, that area in the Depression was actually a thriving industrial community during one of the toughest times in this country's history. Because Bassett Furniture Factory was starting, the Bassett brothers were starting, the Stanleys were starting, Fieldcrest was built. So a lot of these industries were just getting going in Henry County when the rest of the country was depressed. And now that's, we're facing some hard times again, and that's not the case anymore, so it's kind of sad. But a couple of the voices that I'm going to read initially are from that mountain community. A lot of the people came from Carroll County and Grayson County and Floyd County. My grandmother and her family came from Floyd County, Virginia. And so these early voices are of the mountain people before they migrated. And I always felt like everybody had always lived in Fieldale, and I was the one that wanted to get out. And a lot of my contemporaries, we couldn't wait to leave Fieldale because there was nothing in Fieldale, Virginia for us. And I had, visions of living in an apartment in New York City where life would be thrilling and fast-paced, and I'd probably become famous. And, of course, I'm a poet, so that's not going to happen. But what I came to realize when I was about in my early 30s was that I had met the most interesting people I would ever know right there in Fieldale. So that's what these poems are about. Outrageous love. How long did I wait for him to come love me? Lord, I was starving. Hard as his heart was, it was food to me. Well, I had to fight my way to that bleeding and blinded thing. A demon I was. Must have smelled the blood. On some nights between cold sheets and closed eyes, I'd feed the dark, soft ringlets as if his head already lay on that pillow there, waiting for my love to touch. I'd feel that man's skin beneath my hands, his curls sliding between my fingers, my hands traveling his neck, his chest, his belly, trace and taste sweet bites, sweet morsels of rib, of tender thigh, a morsel of neck meat. Must have cast a mighty spell on him, gobbling him up like that in dreams. He came to me on a Sunday. The mountains moved closer. I heard a whippoorwill at noon. He knocked. I knew it was him, and there he stood, said he was eaten up by melancholy, eaten by sorrow, me on his mind all the time. He didn't show his heart to anybody. Truly, I have married meat and bread. As sure as this banquet passes my lips, love is food. And that's dedicated to my husband, even though I wrote it for him and him. I cast a spell for him. I got inspired by my own poetry. This is a woman who started to speak to me at some point when I was laid up in bed with my foot surgery. And she just wouldn't stop talking to me. And for some reason, when I read this poem, I always want to cry, but I don't know why, because I've never met this woman in the flesh. But anyway, this is Labor of Leaving. I snipped these stubborn brown buttons from your old blue shirt, faded and worn slick, and sew them on my new green dress made by the labor of a dissatisfied mind. Every stitch a prayer for redemption, every bend of my wrist a heart's turn. You left me alone in my silence, chose to turn from me when I needed more than these buttons to resew and your supper to reheat. There's no redemption in work alone. Labor is your church, but my faith is worn weak from unwanted effort, from unrewarded effort and the sameness of mine. My reward is in the darts and tucks of this traveling dress. Green stands for a new life, so I'm giving myself a green dress, that dances across my lap as I turn up the hem to the fat of my calf, of a mind to go shorter but cautious. I push thread through these buttons that you touched every day, buttons from a shirt worn thin as tissue, for lack of a better. Who would have thought redemption could come from a simple bolt of cloth, redemption sold at Joyce's Mercantile for 25 cents a yard? A dress be the liberator of a heart broken and childless, a heart as worn as any shirt or step or stone. Guilt whispers to me, turn back to these tiger lilies outside your window. Like your buttons, they stand out against a green blanket, against my first mind and my body, but not my will. I'm of a second mind now, healed from your breath at my chin. There's no redemption in loss, no salvation in unceasing toil. I wake up each morning to buttons moved from one shirt to another, one faded color to another. This dress, my history changes with it, praise God. The green won't fade and turn to thin film over my hips. It won't be worn to thin tinted glass and show the tear in my worn thinner slip beneath. It will stay rich, courting a mind thirsty with questions. I need to turn thoughts to bricks, to turn this bright redemption into a tar-paved road out of this place. All here stops with this dress. Every stitch a step to some new place. Stitches and buttons, steps and stones. These buttons remind me that you know nothing of redemption. Stuck in a dulled mind, don't bother to call it sorrow. You won't lay eyes on this dress. I'm gone with the coming light, step by step, turn by turn, button by sweet button. Okay, well, so she leaves the mountain. And then the next poem kind of begins a chronicle of the actual building of the mill, because before they recruited people to build the mill, they recruited people to build the mill, to work in the mill, but they recruited people to build the mill. I had one glass of, what was it, peanut water? That and a little cold medicine, and I'm right out of here. Okay, Spring House. We also made a lot of bootleg whiskey up in Henry County, so that kind of plays into the whole thing. Spring House. Buck Waller saw a surveyor marking boundaries at daybreak, made Buck right curious. Come next year, old Buck jumped to a mill whistle. Same surveyor begged a cool drink from Ma at the Spring House. Then they married. Before long, he got hired to drive 16-penny nails, ground to roof. Retired fixing looms. Quilters and planters, milkers and miners all got baptized in streams of eternal cotton, spinning thin and breakneck into yards and yards of jacquard white road. Ma, she spun and spun, till she spun herself white. She spun herself plumb fuzzy, a dust mote on the mill floor. Come one day, she floated off. Mattie Clay. August 1959, I stood before the medicine chest and thought how I should be an actress. Dew filmed my body. My eyes were blue sapphires. Stella in Streetcar Named Desire. But the thought came to me. Instead, I went to bed beside my husband and heard his sleep. I had given birth to 5 children and bought new dresses for each of their weddings. Now, before this yellowed mirror, the sultry look worn away. In my other future, I would play the part of some man's mother. Would I stand before this mirror justified? Or would I still bend low to pull water against my face and neck to wash away last night's kisses? There was a lot going on in these places when people weren't actually working in the mill. Second shift. They're running jackards this week. I'm a spinner. Been spinning for 10 years. Works